Welcome to Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort, host and producer of this show, and welcome to 2024, a brand new year for our podcast. We're excited to kick off this year with an interview with a political leader, which we don't often do, but we do from now and then. This was a special one. We recorded it at the Impact Conference in Phoenix, Arizona, for a congressman from Portland, Oregon, and it's Congressman Earl Blumenauer. You've probably heard about him. He's been famous in the public transit industry because of the work he's done. He's had over 50 years working in government, and he is the founder of the Livable Communities Task Force, the Congressional Bike Caucus. He's been one of Congress's chief spokespeople for livable communities, and he helped lead the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which, as you know, has helped pump billions of dollars into public transit. He recently announced he would not seek re-election to Congress in 2024, and I sat down with him and talked to him heart to heart about reflecting on his career in Congress, many years, what he's most proud of in his career, where he thinks we're at right now in the transit industry, and where he thinks we're going. Great to hear from one of our nation's big political leaders when it comes to public transportation, Congressman Earl Blumenauer. Sit back and enjoy our first interview of 2024. So, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, thank you for being with us on Transit Unplugged.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So we're here in Phoenix for a public transit conference called Impact. And what are you talking about while we're here?
Well, I'm in a series of panels. We're about to go off to a streetcar summit with systems around the country, including one here in Tempe. I was able to start the first modern streetcar in Portland when I was Commissioner of Public Works, and I've been a fanatic about it ever since. We're excited, 22 streetcar systems around the country, helping revitalize neighborhoods and taking us back to the future with proven technology.
I love it. Yeah, I love streetcars too. We're going to go see it while we're here, and I think we're going to meet the mayor of Tempe while we're here as well. He's going to talk about what's going on out there. So why don't we take a step back into your past? You've been a public servant for many, many decades, and you've just announced that you're retiring from Congress, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I guess first off, let me ask you, before we go back, why are you retiring?
Well, it has been 50 years in elective office.
Wow.
54 years in almost nonstop politicking. I started when I was a junior in college. I have no regrets. It's been fun. I'm pleased with things we're able to be a part of. But given the current environment, it's not clear to me, actually it is clear to me, that the best way for me to spend time and energy is not being engaged in fighting politically for 2 more years in Congress with the travel, the politics, the fundraising, all that nonsense.
Yeah.
And frankly, the things that I'm most interested in, it doesn't appear as though they're going to be accomplished best as a member of Congress.
Okay.
So much of this is there are people out there that we can work with in terms of transit and housing and development. Being able to work with people directly on the bicycle revolution.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
Is a more direct way of doing it rather than being bogged down with politics in a toxic Congress.
Yeah, I understand. That's a long time to be involved. Take us back to the beginning and walk us through over a couple minutes about your career.
Well, I mentioned I started when I was in college. I led a campaign in Oregon to lower the voting age, and I got involved with the National Constitutional Amendment. And I was hooked. It was something that seemed to make sense to me. I loved engaging people, particularly bringing different people into the political process. That led directly to my being a legislator in 1972. When I was elected, and that was the most consequential period in Oregon's legislative history. We passed our landmark land use legislation, the first comprehensive statewide legislation for land use. I had legislation that first session, 20 years before Ice-T, that mandated a multimodal comprehensive statewide transportation plan. And it was off the races. It was a fabulous opportunity. Oregon had a very approachable legislative system. There were lots of energetic new people in the process, and it was a great experience. I subsequently actually decided to be involved full-time as a local elected official. And as you know well, I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Absolutely. I love local politics. Yeah.
10 years as Portland's Commissioner of Public Works,
Okay.
which I think is arguably the best local government job in America. I had responsibility for land use, transportation, bikes, environmental services.
Yeah.
It was a system that most people would tell you wouldn't work, where elected officials actually had day-to-day responsibility for administration. But for me, it was a lot of fun, and we got a lot of things done.
Yeah.
In particular, we started Portland's award-winning bike program, started the first urban modern streetcar. It was.
Let's talk about that streetcar, because that is something that people want. That's a kind of rail transit that people love. So tell us about what was going on there and what's happening now when it comes to streetcars in America, even here. I mean, they've got one here.
That's right. Well, one of the sad chapters in the last century of transportation in the United States was a considered effort by automotive interests to kill the streetcars. They fought against having increases in revenue. They bought them up and destroyed them. Pictures of burning streetcars. Who Killed Roger Rabbit wasn't just a cartoon. It was a real story about a conspiracy in Southern California to take the red line, the amazing interurban electric system they had, and to kill it in order to promote automobile transportation. We decided in Portland that we were going to resurrect the streetcar. And we had some fascinating local business people who had the vision, and developers. I had support from my fellow elected officials, and we reinstituted the streetcar. We extended it now 4 times. We were able to secure some federal money, and we have a streetcar network in Portland that is really ties together areas of opportunity. People like it. It's low cost. It is proven technology, and it's a human scale.
Yes.
It doesn't, I mean, I am a big proponent of light rail and spend a lot of time on our system in Portland, but the streetcar fills a niche.
Yeah, let's talk about that for people who aren't familiar with it. What's the difference between light rail and streetcar, and what is that niche? What is it meant to serve?
It's a great and important question that needs more attention. The light rail is designed on larger cars, more distant between the stops, and more people at the particular element. The streetcar is smaller. It is nimble. It's cheaper. It stops more frequently. You can outrun a streetcar.
Right.
But in a place like Portland where it rains all the time.
Yeah, people can jump on and jump off, right?
Jump on and jump off. And it's a different perspective that makes people comfortable. If you're in a foreign country and you're at a bus station.
Yes.
And, you try and make sense out of those maps. And you don't quite know if you're on the right one. In Istanbul, there's no question. The streetcar is going this way or that way.
Right.
And if you get on the wrong direction, you hop off and go the other way. It's something that people are comfortable with.
Yes. I was thinking of Yarra trams in Melbourne, which I've been on. Same kind of thing. It's free in the main part of town. You just jump on. You can see where it's going.
Yep.
And it's packed with people. They love it.
And it is relatively inexpensive. I mean, the streetcar, as I say, is proven technology.
Yeah.
And
you started the first one in America.
No, we started the first modern.
Yeah, modern one. Right. Yeah.
Because
I know they go way back to
San
Francisco.
We still have the Charles Street line in New Orleans.
Right.
That was still functioning.
Yes.
But we had the first modern streetcar.
That's amazing. Now there's 22.
22.
That's great, man.
No.
Thank you for that.
No,
that's wonderful.
It's exciting to watch because this is something, another difference here as opposed to heavy rail or even light rail. The streetcar system is something that you can build relatively quickly. At one point in downtown Portland, we were building streetcar a block every 3 weeks.
Wow.
And people can see this.
Yeah.
It doesn't take decades. It takes a couple of years, and you can see the handiwork.
That's something. So you did that for 10 years. Then you went into what happened then after you were in the city?
Well, I ran for Congress.
Okay. And what year was that?
This was in a special election in 1996.
All right.
It was a time of a little turmoil, not unlike we have now.
Yeah.
It was, but was opportunity to be able to reengage. I felt and continue to feel passionately that the federal government needs to be a better partner in promoting the livability of our communities. We actually had a movement we called Livable Communities. We had a caucus in Congress. We worked with administration. A livable community is one where people are safe, healthy, and economically secure. And that's something the federal government can have a profound impact on in so many different ways. And it's been a very rewarding part of my career, watching this take place, not just in terms of streetcar, but what we do with transit, our efforts in terms of water, in dealing with disaster. I mean, these are a series of things that the federal government has profound impact. People at some point say, well, this really isn't your space. The federal government shouldn't be involved with the decisions of a city council. They don't really impact day-to-day activities in land use and zoning. To which my answer is, the federal government has been involved with land use since we started taking land away from Native Americans and giving it to white settlers. What we did in terms of the railroads and these had profound effects on the shape and nature of our communities. And we need to be more intentional about that. And we are, I think, making some progress, but we've got a long way to go.
Something. So then let's continue the story. You joined Congress. You were in this group, Livable Communities.
What we tried to do is have people focus on these opportunities. I mean, the federal government is the largest landlord, owner, and employer in the United States.
Yeah.
And many of our problems would be, if not solved completely, would be dramatically improved if the federal government played that role right. So we have been working using federal agencies, the Department of Defense, largest consumer of energy in the world. And there's an opportunity in terms of its facilities around the country to be a better partner. I served for 10 years on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which was delightful. I really loved that assignment. I was persuaded in part by my friends Jim Obastar and Peter DeFazio that maybe I could leave the committee. They'd let me come back if I wanted, but in the meantime, maybe I could go to the Ways and Means Committee and raise some money for them to spend on these projects. And that has been a major focus of my work in Congress since then, is to deal with resources for transportation and infrastructure.
That's good. And so you were a big player in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, right? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're still living off that money.
Well, and we will for some time.
Yeah.
Both the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the subsequent infrastructure bill we had is putting tens of billions of dollars where it's needed most. And we're talking an infusion of funds unparalleled in our history.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's the largest program for renewable energy and climate reduction, not just in our history, but anywhere in the world.
That's amazing.
So we've got these pieces here. And for the first time in my career, I've worked with 5 presidents, varying degrees of enthusiasm for the built environment. But Joe Biden is the first one who is totally committed to rebuilding and renewing America and spending the money necessary to do that. And it's been transformational. Secretary Buttigieg is a gifted communicator. The Deputy Secretary, Polly Trottenberg, from New York, and back to Congress,
right,
is gifted in her own right. And we're hard at work to be able to realize the promise of all these legislative initiatives. Focusing on things that are low carbon and equitable is truly transformational. As you know, because you've traveled the country, you've dealt with the consequences. So much of what the United States has done over the decades with federal infrastructure policy was actually destructive. Dropping interstate freeway segments in established neighborhoods without regard to the context is bordering uncriminal. And we're seeing the consequences of that across the country. And we're watching in this administration using these unprecedented resources as a way to try and heal and put communities back together.
So let's talk about the tax credit that you were able to get into the Inflation Reduction Act for the electric vehicle charging station credit for 2- and 3-wheeled electric vehicles, scooters, bikes, all. Tell us about that. That's pretty exciting.
Well, it is an opportunity for us to try and promote e-bikes. You know,
I love e-bikes, man.
Oh,
yeah.
The e-bike, as you know, makes any cyclist into a bike commuter.
Right.
I mean, it is the difference between night and day.
Yeah.
It is something that people can choose to the degree of assist they get, but they're able to really extend their reach, makes a big difference in terms of weather, and broaden the range of people who participate. This is something that I have been obsessed with because cycling should not be the province of hard-bodied young guys.
Right, yeah. What do they call those? Triathletes. Yeah.
The rest of us. Cut us some slack. Being able to use the most efficient form of urban transportation ever designed.
Yeah.
Ever designed. And the e-bike does that dramatically.
Yeah.
And so
I like the scooters too, to be honest with you. I love the scooters.
Well, they all have a role to play, although I will say that
they got to be managed though.
I am, that is very important. And frankly, some of the stewards fall down in their responsibility.
Yeah.
Leaving scooters all over the place.
Yeah. I remember seeing one up in a tree. I won't say which city it was, but my buddy Gary was CEO of the transit system there. And when I first went there, I was like, oh man. But a lot of cities have gotten a handle on it now. And the technology where they bring them back at night.
We've got work to do in terms of safety.
Yeah.
Because there are some folks, and this is a broader concern I think we have these days in terms of having the behavior of the motorists or the people using the technology to be responsible about it.
Yes.
Not moving into space that at speeds that are inappropriate. But we've got a larger concern. Frankly, we're watching a breakdown in terms of behavior of motorists.
Yeah,
problems.
civility, yeah.
Well, and it's life and death.
Yeah,
we have
right.
a huge spike in terms of people being killed and maimed on the roadways. But what we did with the e-bike and some of this infrastructure is a part to try and put the pieces in place.
That's great.
So that there's greater application. We've also in the legislation done in terms of the infrastructure for electric vehicles.
Yes.
You know, it's all a part of
charging stations, those things. Yeah.
To make a transition to electrification of the transportation systems. And it's exciting. Electric buses, electric cars, e-bikes. It's part of an opportunity for us to save energy and to be able to enhance the technology and extend it to more people.
Yeah. What do you think of hydrogen-powered vehicles?
It's part of the future.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I'm high on hydrogen. I think it's an up and coming technology. It's about 10 years behind battery electric, but I think we need all the solutions, especially here in America, where now we're down to 2.5 to 3 working electric bus manufacturers since one of them was pulled out, and the issues with the other one, and so I think we need to look at all those options. Let's talk about the Safe Streets and Roads for All program.
Well, I had the first legislation, the Vision Zero. You know, this notion that we don't have to accept carnage on the roadways. You know, back in the day, as you know, we used to have mixed use in our roadways, and it naturally provided a disincentive for speeding. People were accommodating. But, you know, part of what I talked about in terms of the conspiracy that got rid of streetcars, auto interests created a new crime, jaywalking. For centuries, people shared the space.
Right.
And if they were with a chariot or a wagon or a horse, you accommodated that. But the auto interests developed the notion that basically the automobile ought to have right-of-way, and pedestrians were sort of an afterthought. Well, they criminalized natural transportation behavior as pedestrians. And it's not been a smooth ride ever since. we've introduced legislation that says we don't have to accept that. There are things that we can do to literally reduce the carnage to zero. Efforts in terms of road design, in terms of enforcement, engineering, are opportunities for us to make sure that we change that paradigm. And as you know so well, the victims tend to be elderly, poor,
Right.
the young, and that's not fair.
No.
So we've had some significant success putting together resources to implement traffic safety. There's an extra $1 billion in there to try and move it forward. But we're also moving in terms of other efforts with resources that are being allocated under these programs to be able to extend the opportunities to make them safer. The notions in this to have road and transportation investments to actually heal communities, provide resources to put them back together, whether they were when they were divided. Using these unprecedented resources to connect them. You know, part of the problem that we've got some of our pedestrian and cycle infrastructure, that we've got a pathway here that's a segment, and they don't fit together neatly. And so part of what we want to do is to make this seamless to promote safety.
That's great. So I want to move into, in our last few minutes, some fun questions. But first, I want to say thank you for all you've done for this industry and for the people of this country in helping us improve public transit. I mean, thank you so much for the work you've done.
Well, nothing has given me greater satisfaction than watching the changes take place, the rebirth of transit systems, alternative transportation, walking, biking, pedestrian. This has been a quiet revolution that I think is starting to crest.
So now into the fun questions. So walking and running, you mentioned. So Phil Knight and Nike coming. I've read that book, Shoe Dog, which is a great business autobiography. Do you know Phil? Have you met him and all that? I'm sure, right? Yeah. What a great thing for your city to be known for. Your city itself has a great reputation for an amazing transit system. Sam DeSue, who I mentioned to you earlier before we went on the air, is the GM CEO there. And he and I are old friends from when he was in Kansas City before that. But he asked me to ask you a couple questions. So if you don't mind, I'll ask you them. And the first is, what do you feel like your biggest accomplishment has been over the last over 25 years in Congress as it relates to transit? Do you have like one that you're most proud of or that you think is your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I'm pleased that we've been able to develop a constituency for transit. This conference that we're having a conversation at is part of the effort to try and broaden the range of people who are involved with transit advocacy. I'm proud of being sort of the initiator of the modern streetcar movement.
Yes.
Support for light rail, trying to integrate it into a political mainstream. I'm proud to have played a little role in doing that. A lot has happened in the last 27 years, and I'd like to think that we help move that along.
That's great. And what will you miss most in Congress?
Well, many of the people I serve with are really outstanding human beings. There are some that I'm not going to miss, and I'm not going to miss the dysfunction. I love what we do working to try and help people with the federal government being a partner, as I mentioned, to make families safe, healthy, and economically secure. Being able to take some of these elements and move them to fruition, where we're using those federal opportunities to make things better, to solve problems rather than create new ones.
That's great. And last question is, what's next for you on your journey, especially as it relates to Portland? That's what Sam wanted me to ask.
Well, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to in 14 months is not being on a plane for 14 hours every week. And
you do it every week?
I go home every week. Well, that's home, and we've got things to do there.
Right.
I won't miss the airplanes. I won't miss the contentious way that it is developed, particularly with this Republican majority that can't even figure out why they're trying to impeach Joe Biden. The dysfunction.
Politics has gotten very divisive, hasn't it?
It is ugly. And to watch the level of dysfunction and discord
All right. So what are you going to do, though? Do you have plans? Do you know what you're going to do? Can you say, or you don't want to say yet?
Well, mostly what I'm interested in doing is continuing the work that I do without being encumbered by day-to-day politics.
Yeah.
Without having to run a campaign. I mean, I could run for re-election, I would win, but I'd burn a lot of time and energy. And then you're caught up in the political ritual.
Right. Yeah.
I've done that for 50 years. I don't need any of those caucus meetings and the fundraising efforts and the pointless, meetings that add no value to my life or anybody else's.
So you're going to basically just keep the fight going?
I want to continue the work, not be bogged down by the politics.
Yeah.
And I'm quite confident that the things that we've worked on in infrastructure, one of my crusades is to have the United States stop subsidizing a diet that makes Americans sick.
Thank you.
Reforming agriculture. We've done works in terms of healthcare reform, and there are any number of things that they're not really low-hanging fruit. It's just a matter of picking it up off the ground. And I'm looking forward to being able to concentrate time and energy on things that interest me, and being able to do it more directly.
That's great. Well, we wish you great success as you do that. And thank you for your years of service to this country and for what you've meant to the public transportation industry.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Happy New Year. This is Tris Hussey, editor of the Transit Unplugged podcast, and thank you for listening to our first podcast of 2024 with our special guest, Congressman Earl Blumenauer. Now, coming up next week on the show, we have Ken Divers and Flora Castillo talking about the SEPTA SCOPE program, which is helping vulnerable populations get the help they need and make transit safer for everyone. Hey, did you know we have a brand new newsletter for Transit Unplugged? Go to transitunplugged.com to sign up, and you'll always know what's going on with the podcast and the TV show and be able to catch up on past episodes. If you have a question, comment, or want to be a guest on the show, you can email us anytime at info@transitunplugged.com. Transit Unplugged is brought to you by Modaxo. At Modaxo, we're passionate about moving the world's people. And at Transit Unplugged, we're passionate about telling those stories. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.